My name is Melissa Moats. I grew up in Arkansas, but I've been in DeKalb, Texas for about 34 years now. Been married to my husband, Stephen, for 29 of those years. Have 3 daughters, 2 son-in-laws, and actually 8 months old today, our granddaughter, Norjo, who is definitely the star of the show. I've spent 30 years coaching high school basketball, teaching, and really kind of a crazy story. Ended up in DeKalb, Texas. Had a call from athletic director here. I'd graduated mid-year, and so he called and asked me if I wanted to apply for a job. I came down, applied for a job, and got hired in August, and was hired to coach junior high basketball. And you know, everything was rocking along. And then the day before Christmas break, my very first year, I was 22 years old. The high school basketball coach got let go, and so I moved into to be the head coach that year. One of the things that they failed to divulge to me in the interview, though, was that the high school team had lost 62 consecutive games. And so that was a little bit of a shock. But, you know, I accepted that challenge, and I really just kind of threw myself into that. I kind of wrapping that back in my spiritual story. I got saved at age 17 at a basketball camp. You hear me say basketball a lot because that was kind of pivotal in my life. But as I started my coaching career, I kind of compartmentalized that, right? I had my career, and then I had, you know, my coaching and my Christian life, and it just didn't all really gel together that well. I threw myself headfirst into trying to turn a program around that, you know, needed a lot of help, and I did. We started being successful, but somewhere along the way, all of my drive, all of my passion, all of my focus on winning kind of made my identity be tied to winning, right? It was all about performance. My joy was dictated by my circumstances. And so if we were winning, I was great. If we were losing, I was terrible. And so, you know, I looked up, and on the outside, everything looked great. But on the inside, I was a mess. You know, I realized that, you know, and a lot of people are like this. On the outside, everything looks good. And so even in today's world, you know, it'd be like Facebook perfect. Oh, everything's good. You know, their family's perfect. And I was kind of portraying that, right? I was comparing myself to other coaches, and I was trying to win or trying to do all these things, but I was broken inside, and I'd never dealt with a lot of things that I should have dealt with, things that were deep in my life. And I started believing the lies of the enemy. You know, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you're too far gone, you have no purpose in life. And so I listened to those lies, and I started to believe them as truth. Because, you know, if you listen to something long enough, it becomes truth to you. And so I was in a really, really miserable place in my life. And you wouldn't know it on the outside, but on the inside I was. And I remember sitting in my apartment one night, it was a Saturday night, and I just kind of came to the end of myself. And I cried out to the Lord, and I was like, God, I've got to have some relief. I've got to have some peace, because what I'm doing is not working. And in that tiny little apartment, it was over on Ronald Street, God met me there. And I felt a presence wash over me and a freedom wash over me that I'm not sure I'd ever felt before. Even though I was a Christian, I wasn't living in that presence of God. And so from that night on, it changed me. I got up the next morning, I decided to go to church, went to a little white church called Maranatha Christian Center, slid in on the back pew, didn't even know what time church started, and slid in on the back pew. And I remember Pastor Steve started a message called Healing from Past Hurts. And I knew in that moment that God saw me. He wasn't waiting on me to clean myself up. He wasn't waiting for me to be a certain way or act a certain way or whatever. He was pursuing me. And that was life-changing to me. And so from that point on, God became more real to me than this chair I'm sitting in. And he's remained that way to me all of my life. I kept going to church. I started growing. And I started replacing the lies of the enemy with the truth of who God says I am. And it radically changed me. There was just so much freedom and so many lies that I had believed. And so it changed my life. And here I am 30-something years later, still serving, still leading. I work part-time, retired from basketball coaching. I know we kind of didn't say all that in the beginning, but I retired from coaching 4 years ago. Now I work part-time with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so I get to go around and talk about Jesus and sports. And what a great opportunity. And I look back now and I say, God, how did you take this 22-year-old who's so messed up, who was thrown into winning, who's being defined by the scoreboard, and you turned it into something so much more than I could ever ask or imagine? But that's how God is. And so I would say there are a lot of people who are kind of where I was, right? You were trying to fill that God-shaped hole with something else. And the thing that I've learned over my life is there's nothing else that's going to fill that hole. The only thing that you're going to find hope and peace in is Jesus Christ. Everything else will let you down. So I would say if somebody's watching this video and you're like, yeah, I kind of get that. You know, like I'm feeling one way, I'm looking one way on the outside, but on the inside I'm miserable. I'm just going to tell you, it's never too late. You're never too far gone. God doesn't want you to clean yourself up. He just wants you to surrender and be obedient to Him and watch what will happen. Talking a little bit about just sports and all the things that go with that. You know, I grew up playing sports, loved it, loved everything about it, but there was a lot of pressure. And even when I got in my coaching career, I see the pressure that coaches and athletes deal with. And I think had I changed my perspective early on, especially in the coaching realm, to being more about glorifying God in everything I'm doing versus, you know, trying to win a trophy. Because I learned really early on, I won some really big games in my coaching career. I mean, we went 3-4 rounds deep. We had some great success. But I remember I'll tell you a specific, I remember walking across the floor at Commerce. We just lost in the regional finals on the buzzer. And I remember walking off, you know, we had a great season and thinking, is this all there is? Right? Because those things will leave you empty. And if your identity is tied up in what you're doing and not who you're doing it for, you will be left empty. You may not think it at the time, but you're going to get there. And even if you happen to get to that level of success, it will let you down. Because the only thing that won't let you down is Jesus Christ. So I see athletes and coaches, you know, and they're all about it. Even parents, you know, pushing kids at a young age, you know, we've got to do this and we've got to do this because we've got to be a certain way and we've got to be competitive. And those things are fine. There's nobody in the room that wants to win more than I do. But I've realized throughout my life and my coaching career and even as an athlete that winning on the scoreboard is not everything. Winning on the scoreboard is great, but it doesn't dictate my joy anymore, right? My joy is found in Christ alone. And so if your whole identity is tied up into what you do, who are you when you walk away? And I see that so many times in coaches and athletes. Athletes graduate from high school and they've been so tied up into who they are, you know, as a player that they don't even know who they are when they leave. And so that's been my advice as I travel around and talk with FCA, with coaches and athletes and try to mentor and try to lead is let what you do be a reflection of who is in you. The freedom that Christ brings will go with you throughout your life, and you will find more joy, win or lose, when you have Jesus on your side than you ever will apart from Him. You know, one thing I would say, because there's a lot of athletes, and I deal with a lot of athletes every single week who, you know, they're going to church, they're reading their Bible, they're doing all these things, but they're maybe not just totally sold out, right? You know, they're still a teenager and they're still facing pressures and still wanting to fit in and still comparing themselves to the people around them. And I always say, comparison kills calling, right? God's called you on purpose and for a great purpose. And so I would speak just directly to teenagers. Don't wait, right? Don't wait until you're, you know, when I get out of school, I'm going to go all in for Christ. Christ has a good plan for you now. And it's so important as you're going through your, you know, you're growing up and you're becoming a young adult to protect the testimony that God's given you, to protect the call that He has given you. Because I promise you, we have an enemy in this world who would like nothing more than to steal that call from you. One of my favorite scriptures is John 10:10, because I feel like it just basically summarizes the gospel. It says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus came so we'd have life and have it abundantly. And so don't allow the enemy to come and steal your testimony as a teenager, as you're out making choices. And then, you know, one day as you get older and you're like, why did I do that? So really press into the call that He has on your life. I know it's hard to know what He has for you, but I can tell you that He has a plan, and that plan is good. And that plan is always good. And another scripture I would just tell you that's really just ministered to me and that I'll share a lot is in Deuteronomy, where it talks about God will never leave us, and He will never forsake us, and He will never abandon us, and He will personally go before you. So as you're fighting these battles that you're fighting in school, or whether you're in school, whether you're grown, we all fight battles. Whatever it is that you are facing, know that God will never, ever leave you. It's against His nature. He can't do it, and He loves you so much.